So I'm going to start with Emma O'Halloran's Natural History. And this sets extracts from the naturalist and explorer here, Alfred Russel Wallace, and his book, The Malay Archipelago, published in 1869. It was originally composed in 2015 for the early music ensemble Gallicantus, but the work was revised for SSATB forces, and it was performed by the Mornington Singers, conducted by Orla Flanagan, premiered in November 2022. Wallace is best known for independently conceiving the theory of evolution. I didn't know that before researching this. We all think of Charles Darwin. But his book is a vivid account of the different varieties of animals and plants that he discovered whilst doing fieldwork in Singapore, Malaysia and Indonesia. So the explorer was warning even then about the dangers of deforestation and soil erosion in the late 1800s. And O'Halloran then, she wrote this in her programme note for the piece. When she read the book, she kept returning to the list of all the different species that Wallace discovered. Thousands upon thousands of birds, reptiles, mammals and insects. It felt important to meditate on that, to give this list the sanctity and reverence it deserves, and to remember that we are all part of the natural world too, and that it's something that we should fight for. So O'Halloran's music focuses on specific numbers of reptiles, birds and insects, and I'm going to start by playing the introduction to this piece. So what I love straight away about this, it creates this really archaic tone with the open B flat fifth here at the start and the pedal B flat then in the tenors and basses, which we can hear throughout the opening section. And that sustains this sound of the past with these features prominent in medieval music. And I actually when I was listening to it at first, I was thinking of the likes of Peretin as well. And I'll show you just some similarities in a minute between his Viderunt Omnes and this work in particular. So she's immediately bringing in influences from the medieval era to draw us, I suppose, back to the past. I know it's the 1800s, but to draw us back to the past and the discovery of these different mammals and variety of species. So it actually takes 34 bars for the phrase 310 specimens to be fully presented. O'Halloran elongates the words, as we could hear, through jaunty syncopated rhythms, particularly in the upper voices, which I've boxed in blue. And these oscillate between these open chords and the closer interval of a second, while naturally building and fading in dynamics, creating musical interest. So this is the start of Natural History, which we heard, and this is the start of Peretin's piece from the medieval era. So we can see that we have the pedal tones and similar kind of oscillations, particularly in the upper voices. So more than likely she was inspired by this music in her setting. So the melodic motifs are presented in dialogue throughout between the upper voices and the lower voices, and they primarily move by steps, so they're quite catchy, they're quite singable, and they're mainly just moving between two notes in each voice. So O'Halloran is almost playing with the listener through such extension of words. We have this 3 as well, elongated above the drone, and it's leading to this falling minor third cluster in the sopranos and altos, followed by silence, and that kind of increases our anticipation to discover what is next in the story and indeed the phrase. So she's drawing us into the sound world and the world of the discoverer as well, teasing us with the extended diction, catchy motifs and fluctuating textural density. What specimens are we actually going to discover in this? So I'm just going to play the next part and to hear how she progresses the music.
I'll share.
So there's a lot going on even in that main section, and it's very catchy. Even when I heard it at first, I was at a Mornington Singers concert and it was just stuck in my head. Well, it's still stuck in my head. I just come along singing it, and it's kind of a history lesson as well with the different words, which I'll go into in a minute. But yeah, so as we can hear, as the piece progresses, she's kind of juxtaposing individual passages of text in a denser polyrhythmic texture, and it's a dialogue constantly between the upper voices and the lower voices, capturing the excitement of the naturalist on his travels. So, and she's continuing that kind of medieval sound as well with the parallel fifths, and the tenor and bass introduce the phrase 7,500 specimens of shells, repeating this melody constantly, and then it's layered with the sopranos and the alto, entering with the uplifting phrase 13,100 specimens of Lepidoptera, which are actually insects, they're butterflies, which I did not know until I researched, and 83,200 specimens of Coleoptera, which are beetles. So it's quite a fascinating history lesson in itself, and it's really catchy melodies as well that get stuck in your head. So the texture then becomes even more active as other species are presented, and the section culminates in the recitation of the phrase 13,400 specimens of other insects at independent tempi. So these lines here is showing that gradually we're moving away from the singing and kind of this just recitation of the same phrases in each of the voices at their own independent tempi. So the sopranos continue the melody in parallel fourths above this carpet of aleatoric recitation on their given note. So all the voices give way to this indeterminate repetition of the phrase on their respective tones, and again she fades into a brief silence. So the final section then recapitulates the introductory primitive sound of the open fifth and drone in the lower voices, but this time a tone higher on C. So I'll just play that finale for you. So just as she opened the work with that lovely open sound, she's concluding in the same way. So the swaying of the upper texture elongates 100 as before, given the piece a sense of symmetry. And it concludes with some word painting as well. So this is one of the only times where all the voices are actually united in what they're singing. So they're all united homophonically on the phrase 100 specimens in all. So they're all together, resolving to that open C fifth. So overall, this is a fascinating, innovative work by Emma O'Halloran that brings us right back to the wonder of Wallace's discoveries and the evolution of various species over time. So in terms of considering this piece for a choir, the parts are quite accessible. They're very catchy and melodic, with well-chosen ranges and predominantly stepwise movement in the parts. And there's a lot of repetition as well. So the various motifs, they're gradually introduced in a really clever way, and they're layered through the texture. But as I said, it's mainly constructed of 2 or 3 notes, usually moving by step in each voice, with a particular emphasis on the funky syncopated rhythms throughout. And what I love about this is how effectively O'Halloran synthesizes both past and present sounds in her work. So we have that archaic sound at the start and gradually leads into the aleatoricism, which of course is a lot more prevalent in contemporary music. So it's resulted in a lively, compelling work that would enrich any concert programme. So that's Emma O'Halloran's. I'm going to move on now to Eoghan Desmond's on Gleann Mór. So I'm studying Eoghan Desmond as part of my PhD, and what I've noticed since 2022, he's turned his focus. He's largely a composer of sacred choral music, but he's turned his focus to Irish language texts and poetry on themes of environmentalism, such as Beloved, I Am, and Gohanna Éireann Gannoch, due to his concern over the ongoing environmental crisis. But he does not intend to preach or condemn through the choral medium. Rather, he states, I am writing environmental music because I'm deeply stressed. It's kind of the only real outlet that I seem to have. I've always loved the natural world and I've appreciated it. And I am writing music about it in the hope that people hear it and sing it and go, oh yeah, the world is actually quite beautiful. So a work that could be deemed the beginning of this focus on the natural world is on Gleann Mór for SATB Voices. It's a setting of a poem by Grace Willans here, inspired by the landscape of the Devil's Glen in County Wicklow. So Desmond recalled during an interview on Lyric FM how he discovered this text while browsing through Hodges Figgis, and he was captured by the idyllic scene of a couple sitting by the waterfall as the sun sets. So such was his inspiration, he actually finished the piece in a single day. I'd love to be able to do that. And it was premiered by Chamber Choir Ireland, conducted by Paul Hillier in June 2022. So Desmond illustrates the Devil's Glen throughout the piece on both a small scale and also a broader scale, mainly through the cascading melodies and the textural scaffolding. So this is the opening, and I've just boxed here this particular motif, which you hear throughout in the upper 3 voices. And a bit like O'Halloran, he's gradually introducing this and building the texture. So I'll just play the opening. So you can hear the waterfall almost through this descending 5-note motif. So the sopranos and altos repeated at first, just that 5-note stepwise phrase, which is constantly repeated on You Take My Hand Beside the Waterfall, which is an obvious example of word painting that evokes the streaming water. So each note is also repeated on the descent, engendering a lilting motion that enhances the music's tranquil atmosphere. The soprano imitates the alto, and I've got it highlighted here as well. So the soprano imitates the alto and the tenor is introduced as well. So it's creating a canon, so to speak, a vocal waterfall, and create this through this gentle ostinato that continues throughout each of the verses. So when the tenors join, it's augmenting that polyphonic texture from which the bass's melody emerges. And what I like about this, the melody is, we usually hear the melody in the soprano, but he's actually brought it into the bass through each of the verses, leaving the waterfall to the upper voices, probably due to the lighter sound as well. So it's interesting actually that a very similar falling motif is used in his later piece I Am from 2024, which also focuses on the natural world, setting words by Hildegard of Bingen that contemplate the presence of the Holy Spirit throughout nature. So the element of water is a key feature within this piece, like on Gleann Mór, with the words river, rain and dew interweaving through a more complex polyphonic texture. It's a lot more complex in terms, it's for double choir. This was premiered as well by Chamber Choir Ireland and New Music Dublin, and it's also been performed by Mornington Singers as well. So I'm just going to play, these particular motifs is very, very similar, the falling, lilting motion throughout, and it's always occurring on something to do with water. So I'll just play a small bit of this. So it's not as, I suppose it requires a lot more score analysis, and it's going more so across the texture, but every time something to do with water appears, this motif is used. So again, a form of word painting. So whether Desmond is actually conscious of the close similarities between these motifs in both works is uncertain, but the narrative parallels are clear, with both melodic ideas representing water in its various forms in compositions which are both based on the natural world. So more broadly, the repeated nature of the motifs in both pieces, particularly in Gleann Mór, the first one, also demonstrates Desmond's interest in ambient music, which is characterised by simple repeating textures. And he has stated that if you hear something enough times, it actually becomes background, which is the case in Gleann Mór. The waterfall almost becomes the background as the bass's melody emerges. So just for those that might not be as familiar with ambient music, Max Richter, an English composer, he's one such, his music has really influenced on Desmond. Desmond has stated it several times that Max Richter in particular is a huge influence on his work. So he's an ambient post-minimalist composer, and you can hear in all of his pieces really how he layers the sounds to create this tranquil, immersive, meditative atmosphere. So I'm just going to play a small bit of On the Nature of Daylight by Max Richter, just to give you a sense of how Desmond is integrating it into his own work as well. So I'll just play a little bit of one of the first themes. Just going to skip on because it goes on for quite a length of time, so I'll just skip on to how the texture has expanded. So it's quite repetitive, but it's beautiful, and you can hear how he's layered all of the melodies. So each part does repeat, but he's adding interest through a new melody each time. So that's just one particular example of a composer who has influenced Eoghan Desmond. And for anyone who's maybe interested in hearing more about Max Richter as well, he actually, again linking it to nature, he has a reimagined version of Vivaldi's Four Seasons as well. So maybe some of you are familiar with it. Absolutely beautiful. And Desmond has also said that that was a work that really impacted his own thinking on music in general, particularly in terms of textures and how to build and layer that within choral music. So just to move back to on Gleann Mór, the piece concludes with the image of the waterfall and the falling melodic motifs across the soprano, the alto and the tenor, and it's underpinned by this sustained bass note on G. And it resolves to a hum on a mixed interval chord, which is quite common in contemporary music and particularly in Desmond's work. So there's a sense of ambiguity at the end and haziness, as if it's not finished, there's more to go. So I'll just play that for you. So overall, Desmond, through on Gleann Mór, is illustrating the beauty of the natural world and this waterfall in particular. And he creates quite an immersive sound world without directly telling us, look at how beautiful our natural world is and we need to protect it. So it's an accessible piece again for choirs due to the repeated nature of the stepwise motifs. There's a verse-chorus structure, and most significantly, it evokes in such an effective way the Devil's Glen. So that's one piece by Eoghan Desmond, but he has a broader collection in recent years of several choral works on the theme of the natural world. So moving on then to O Curlew by Jonathan Nangle. This responds to the climate change and specifically species in danger of extinction. And this piece was commissioned and premiered by New Dublin Voices in 2023. So Nangle sets W.B. Yeats's He Reproves the Curlew, which is a poem about love, loss and dying passion. And the curlew's haunting call embodies Yeats's yearning for a love that's now lost, and his grief is echoed and traumatised through nature. So Nangle takes this text and transforms it into a lament for the curlew. So although this bird was prevalent in Yeats's time, its population has actually diminished quite significantly over the past century, and as of last month there's actually only 95 breeding pairs across Ireland. So it's not Nangle's only exploration of the natural world in his music. His recent work actually incorporates field recordings and instruments, Blue Haze of Deep Tyne, and that was premiered by Crash Ensemble at this year's New Music Dublin. And it invites us to consider not just what the sea looks like, but also what it sounds like. So in his programme note for O Curlew, Nangle outlines how curlews are mostly associated with their vocalisations, but it is their distinct trilling and bubbling call that rises in bittersweet notes that people might be familiar with. Their calls have inspired many poets, such as Yeats, and Seamus Heaney wrote in the foreword to the Loch Beg Conservation Plan, "They belong first and foremost in memory and imagination. They evoke a dreamland that was once the real land, a shore at evening, quiet water, wind in the grass, the calls of birds, maybe a man or a woman out in a backfield just standing looking, counting cattle, listening." So a curlew is set for SATB voices and also an SATB semi-chorus, the latter embodying the haunting cry of the curlew throughout. So the semi-chorus, as you'll hear in a minute, opens the piece with this plaintive call on an unfolding G major ninth, and it serves as an ostinato throughout the piece. So a bit like Desmond and his ostinato, this is also quite ambient with a repeated figure throughout, above which the full choir communicates the full length of Yeats's poem. So the more sedated harmonic ostinato, as well as the homophonic motion and the syllabic setting of the main chorus, creates a tranquil, mournful tone that is sustained throughout. And I'll play some for you now. So it's a beautiful piece of music, and you might hear and see from the bottom there. So this is repeated the whole way throughout in the semi-chorus until we get to hear this sforzando, Cry No More. So the sopranos, you might have heard, they present probably the most vivid, embellished expression of the curlew's cry with this oscillating major third. And it's almost folk-like as well in its rhythmic construction. And the silence between the phrases within Nangel's piece contributes to creating an ambient, meditative atmosphere and offers a moment almost for the curlew or the choir's call to echo into the ether. So there's also some dissonant moments as well in the piece, or more pronounced dissonant moments underlined by the false relations between the voices and the sustained rhythms. So for example, the semi-chorus maintains the G major ninth and the other voices progress through passion-dimmed eyes in a discordant manner with these enharmonics. So we have like the D flat in the top soprano here, but we also have this C sharp in the semi-chorus. So they're the same note, but it's giving this idea that it's almost a polytonal texture. So the second soprano's chromatic descent is particularly effective, and I'll play it in a minute. So the piano conclusion then, the soft conclusion on the F sharp minor ninth chord, followed again by a bar of rest, helps to convey this image of dimmed eyes, and more broadly, the diminishing call of the curlews in our current climate. So it continues along this kind of slow ambient tempo throughout. And then after this climactic exclamation of crying in the winds, probably the most effective embodiment of the curlew occurs at the end. So the semi-chorus's ostinato returns, and Nangel indicates for a small number of singers, around 6 to 8, to mimic the calls of the curlew through whistling. So he states on the score, it's not quite clear there, but he says, favour the ascending bubbling cry, but do include others. The desired result is haunting, not cacophonous. So all the other voices revert to a sustained O, and they repeat the harmonies 5 times, divided by a bar of rest, gently building and fading in dynamics. So the piece, as you can hear, concludes in a very haunting manner, with only the whistling cries of the curlews dissolving into nothingness. It's a powerful evocation and reminder of the bird's dwindling population. And it also shows really the effect that extended vocal techniques can have within choral music to really bring to life the call of the birds. So moving on to the final piece this evening, and staying with the theme of birds, we have Anya Mallon's Liminal Dawn, which is another beautiful illustration of birdsong and a further reminder of the sharp decline in bird populations. So this again is set for mixed choir and also soprano soloists. And Mallon notes in the programme note that this piece pays homage to the songsters of the springtime and laments the loss of future song and the potential of a silent spring to come. So Mallon sets Ella Wheeler Wilcox's Dawn within this piece, and it's a reflection on Ellis Gibbons's piece Long Live Fair Oriana, and Oriana, which translates to sunrise, being a nickname for Queen Elizabeth I. So I'll play a little bit in a minute, but we're immediately transported to the pastoral scene of the day dawning, the world slowly waking up, the chorus of birds singing to one another in anticipation of a new day and the hope that it brings. So the sopranos open the work, and there's two soloists and then those within the main ensemble, and they individually join to imitate birdsong in approximate rhythms and tempi. So Mallon's choice to set the opening in a controlled aleatoric manner reflects the natural call of the birds. So the singing and the timing, it's not artificial, it's not methodical, it's not set specifically within the music. So the falling fourths as well in the voices, they create a gentle carpet of song from which the alto emerges with the melody. So I'll play some of that now. So you can really hear the birds embodied by the soloists and the main ensemble as well. And we can hear similarities between the more subtle bird cries in the form of minor thirds in O Curlew, as well as the lower voices then emerging with the melody beneath melodic activity in the upper voices in Desmond's and Gleann Mór. So Mallon maintains the sound of birds as the piece progresses, the soprano soloist continuing this antiphonal dialogue above the other voices. So we have this moment of homophony in the main ensemble, forming a G major seventh with an added sixth, and the upper voices have these really nice close intervals as well. And a new idea follows, which I have in red here, the light with the rising melody in the tenor and alto painting the sun rising. And I'll just play a little bit of that. So Malin is quite innovative with her textural organisation throughout the piece. So we have these sparse moments of just the bird song in the diaphanous upper voices, and then we have these instances of gradually layered phrases building to climaxes throughout the piece. So a particularly effective example of this textural development is her setting of the phrase "Rise, Oriana," creating this sense of momentum with the individual vocal entries. So there's the solo soprano, and that's imitating the bird song, and she's gradually rising melismatically on an open ah, building in dynamics from pianissimo to mezzo forte, while each choral voice enters with the phrase "Rise, Oriana" on a repeated tone, which is sustained as the next voice then enters with the same text. So the alto begins by echoing on a repeated D, followed by the soprano on an A, and then the bass on the G here and the tenor on the A, and the soloist vocalization is still becoming more elaborate above. So this leads then to a falling stepwise Oriana motif, which I have in red, which becomes quite important for the rest of the piece, and that's sung by the main chorus, again with the solo bird. I have circled in blue the solo bird call interjections. So the falling melancholic motif on Oriana recurs throughout the piece in the soprano line, and it's accompanied by primarily repeated notes then in the altos, tenors and basses. So I'll just play a little bit of that. So this is very much a piece that spotlights sopranos, particularly in the higher register. So the soloists are consistently maintained in the upper stratum, evidently intended to emulate the bird song in the most effective way. The aleatoric moments with the approximate rhythms and the vocal embellishments capture the early morning sunrise and the bird dialogue, with the voices interweaving freely and reminding the listener of the beauty of natural bird song. The piece really, it's a dialogue between these bird soloists and the choir, who continue to tell us the story beneath the floating song. And just as the piece began, we are left with a solo voice calling repeatedly, descending from C sharp to F sharp, an interval that definitely requires excellent vocal technique, anyone who can reach those C sharps at such a high register. And it's fitting that the piece concludes with the same melancholic Oriana motif which we heard a minute ago, lamenting the loss of future bird song and a silent dawn. I'll just play that conclusion. So both bird-based works by Nangle and by Malin demonstrate the variety of ways in which choral music can emulate birdsong and remind us of the devastating decline as well in bird populations. While O'Halloran's work, Natural History, and Desmond's piece on Gleann Mór focus on the broader discovery and the development of species and the landscape around us, again in an illustrative manner, as opposed to this is how we need to treat the world. So none of the composers preach directly to us about the need to be proactive about protecting species and our environment, but they choose poetry and historical accounts and apply creative techniques such as aleatoric vocalizations, call and response structures, word painting and recurring motifs that emphasize the beauty of the world around us and provide us with the space to contemplate this reality and a future that laments the loss of species. As I said, there's lots more compositions. I can't look at them all today, but just to refer back to Eoghan Desmond, Beloved is a really, really good choral work which was commissioned by the Irish Youth Choir, and it includes a flute as well, and that laments the loss of the Quai O-bird. I Am, which you heard a little bit of, and Gohanna Éireann Ganach, which is a larger 6-movement work in the Irish language about the landscape of Ireland. Linda Buckley's Winter in Inishmaan is another one that kind of evokes the sea, really, through the, and it's a double choir work as well. Nora Walsh's Inception Horizon. Nora's here with us today. In a more kind of indirect manner then, Deirdre McKay's setting of Samuel Beckett's poem Sable qui glisse. I do not speak French, so I'm really sorry if I pronounced that wrong. But again, that kind of vaguely reflects on the natural world as well, undersung by Sean Doherty, and Is or Gevred by Owen Mulvaney as well, which kind of combines medieval Ireland and pagan Ireland, but also the coming of winter, and it's a really catchy work, kind of in the same vein as Emma O'Halloran's work. So again, I'd like to thank everyone here today for coming, and I'd like to thank Yvonne and Maeve and Aileen for facilitating this talk, and I hope you got an insight, a small insight into some of the brilliant choral works that are being composed today by Ireland's composers, which focus on the lovely world around us. So thank you.